Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I have a really cool trick for you regarding stereo basslines and adding a little bit of grit and weight to your bassline. This is going to be a little bit of an unconventional trick in the sense that the bassline itself is going to sound very bad when you're going to hear it on its own. But when it's in the mix, I actually really like what this effect does with the kick and bass relationship with the rest of the mix. And that's at the end goal of a good track is to create a whole track, not just a normal kick and bass. So I'm first going to show you how it sounds in the mix so that you don't get confused when we isolate it and listen to just the bassline. So here we have the project. This is a project that I've been working on for a little while now. Actually, this is one of those projects that came really quickly. I think this was 2 weeks of writing in total. So that's really quick for me actually. And this is the part where it's kind of speeding up. We have a tempo speed up. Going into a faster part. The part before here is 110 BPM and the part after it is 143 BPM. And this is kind of the transition part. It's also where the effect is a little bit more noticeable going into this. So I'm first going to play it with the effect, then I'm going to play it without this bass effect, and then I'll talk about what actually is going on. So this is the effect right here, and I'm going to play it in its most extreme form, which means that I'm just going to let you hear the kick and the bass, and then I'll turn off this LFO tool, which is used to kind of keep this effect in check. You'll hear that if I just play it like this, then it's a very extreme effect listening to just the kick and bass. You can hear we get this very distorted mid-range and also this very stereo bassline. And the reason for these decisions is not to do with the kick and bass itself. If you listen to this on the kick and bass itself with just the kick and bass soloed, it sounds bad, it doesn't sound nice. But it does sound good in the mix, the current mix that I've set up. Now there is a bit of a danger with that, and as most of you guys know, I actually don't mix in this project here. I mix in a separate project by exporting all of the stems and then recreating the project inside of Reaper. The reason for that is I just get better results doing it that way, because I actually have to spend a little bit more attention on all of the elements, re-add all of the elements into the new project. There's often a point in production where you just add an element and you kind of forget about it within your track. If you re-import them all into a new project, then you're forced to think about each individual element that you're adding to the track. So that's just a little bit of a different workflow than most people are used to, but what that means for this effect is that you need to be a little bit careful. You cannot really judge how this effect works until you are in your final mix, because this is in essence a mixing effect. What we're doing is we're giving the bassline the power and the stereo width that it needs to stand out in the mix. You can hear that without the effect, the bassline sounds much more like a traditional Psytrance bassline. It sounds much nicer, if you would say. But in the context of the whole track, it doesn't stand out, it does not have that power. So let's actually see what's going on here. The effect is very simple. There's just this one effect rack that's housing everything basically. We have this overdrive in here, which is set to very low. And then we have this stereo spread. I believe this is a free plugin. I might be mistaken on that, but there's definitely stereo spreading plugins that are free. The important part of this stereo plugin is that it's deterministic in that it does not add like any randomness to it. It's not like, for example, a reverb or using some kind of noise or something like that. I believe this uses comb filters on the different bands that it uses, but I'm not 100% sure about that. The second thing which is important is that we set this frequency to a point where we get mono sub-bass, but also a mono second harmonic, or very close to that. With this track being in G sharp, this might not actually make the second harmonic completely mono, but that's fine. This is just set by ear. You do want your low end to still remain mono, so we don't want this stereo generating effect, which is what this spectral generator here is, to actually create stereo width on those lower frequencies. So really, the way that you can think about this is that for any DAW or for any plugins that you might have, you can just saturate it or distort it, and you can see we're distorting the mid-range. Again, we're removing these very low frequencies as well as these very high frequencies, and you can see that we're just doing a very strong distortion. Actually, we have a lot of drive, we have a lot of tone, we have low dynamics, so the distortion is really strong, but we mix it in very lightly, so 9% dry wet. And of course all of these values fluctuate over time. Here you can see that we are using some higher percentages here in the part where we have the buildup, but overall this effect is applied at the faster part at just 9% wet. You can also see that we're making some changes to all of these over time here to just get a little bit of extra movement in there. And after that we do this distortion, this kind of saturation phase, which you can think about. We then take care of the stereo part, obviously with M Stereo Spread, which I talked about before. And you can see right here we have the automation for that as well, and this is also constantly changing over time depending on the amount of energy that we want for the track, or if we want it to stand out a little bit more. In these parts what is happening is that the kick and bass stands out a bit more, so you can hear coming in from here that we get this kick and bass a little bit more on its own. You can hear this is not the kind of area where you want this effect to be at its strongest, right? As we talked about before, when you just listen to the kick and bass itself, it is a very overwhelming and strong effect. You don't want that on its own in the track here, so here we're just taming the effect of both the stereo plugin as well as the overdrive that we're using. Finally, up until this point we have been listening to it with this LFO tool off. This is because this LFO tool is used to tame the effect. We are essentially kind of overdoing it and then putting it back into the space that it needs. And for the example, I just wanted to show you what this effect was capable of if you have it at its like highest strength of the effect, if we use these settings as kind of like a maximum for it. So you can think of this LFO tool as just keeping this effect in check, and you'll hear what it's actually doing. It's bringing the effect back a little bit, and the way that that works is, one, it's doing some sidechaining, because I had a little bit of issues with some of the filters that are in here of post-ringing. This is obviously some filtering that is going on, especially in here where you have minimum and maximum frequency that always indicates some kind of filter. And also here we have filtering, so there was some post-ringing in here, which is being taken care of by this individual kind of sidechain here, which is actually acting not on the bassline itself, just adding a little bit of a quick fade down here, and then just really removing all of the volume that sits right at the beginning here, the little bump that you can see that sits right here. Then we move on to the second shape, which is applied to the filter cutoff here, and you can see we have this modulation amount here. So this is just filtering the bassline as if it was filtering like a normal bassline filter. And obviously you can play with the shape and the height of all of these peaks and this whole shape in essence to kind of shape the way that you want your bassline to sound. Again, with it and without it you can hear the difference, and I can play around with it a little bit as well. Hopefully you can hear how this telephoto is taming the effect and kind of keeping it in check for us. So that's everything that I wanted to show in today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it and found it useful. This is maybe something that you can experiment with on your own. If you did enjoy the video, then let me know by leaving a like. And if you're new here and you want to see more of what I do, then make sure that you're subscribed. But this is going to be the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.